Hello and welcome to Celtic Down Under podcast. I'm your host Jarrod, and joining me tonight for another Tim Talk episode is Paul from our Monday podcast. How are you, Paul?
Yeah, good, mate. Looking forward to a bit of a chat.
Yeah, no, it'll be good, mate. So the whole purpose, as we discussed off air, the whole purpose of the Tim Talk podcast are basically for we just get on and talk to Celtic fans about their love of the club and how they got into supporting the team and a few other things. But I thought, why not in the off season speak to the podcasters on the Celtic Down Under podcast, so the people who watch regularly can get to know a bit more about you as a Celtic fan and everything. So that's basically what we're looking for tonight. So we'll start off with my first question: how did you become a Celtic fan?
Yes, it's a bit of a weird one, as I guess it maybe is for quite a lot of people that aren't sort of immediately in the sort of environs of Celtic Park in Glasgow. So I grew up born and bred in the northeast of Scotland, in Aberdeenshire. So down the years, you get a bit of leveling that you may be a glory hunter for supporting Celtic. But if you were born when I was born, then to pick Celtic when you live near Aberdeen was absolutely opposite of being a glory hunter. In fact, I've got vague recollections of my old man, who is actually a Celtic fan, but bringing back Gothenburg 1983 scarves. Aberdeen obviously won the Cup Winners' Cup, massive for the city, and I think he thought, you should support your local side, even though he didn't, and he grew up where I grew up. So it's a bit of a weird one, and I sort of question my parents' mentality about all of that. But yeah, I shunned that. I was only about 5 when that happened, sort of wasn't really into having a team at that really young age, and they sort of let it pass. And then weirdly, I think in sort of small town council states, kids at different ages, you all sort of play together. And back when you play football in the streets or in a local scrap of grass, and there's a bunch of kids of all different ages. There's one kid who's a few years older than me. One day he was just wearing a Celtic top, and I haven't seen that before. So, it stood out, and a bit of interest between me and my brother. He's only a year younger than us. And so I don't know, we looked up to this kid. And so the top was pretty, the hoops stand out and stuff. And I don't know, like we just sort of started chatting about it to our folks. And as it turns out, both parents are Celtic fans, right? So my mum's from Glasgow, an Irish Catholic family from just outside Glasgow. My dad grew up a Celtic fan, bizarrely, in Fraserburgh. I think probably the Lisbon Lions had a bit to do with that. He'd have been a 10, 11-year-old kid when that happened. So yeah, without being pushed into it, once me and my brother gave them a tiny inkling that we were that way inclined, they were all over it. So the shirts started coming. Yeah, shirts started coming, and so and look, back there in the 80s, it's not like today where you could pretty much see every game at any point, and everything's really accessible. Like we were playing football, every hour, sent in our primary school years. And then once we were sort of about 11, 12 years old, right through my teens, me and my brother were playing for 2 or 3 different, between the playing for the school and 2 other clubs. You're playing 3 matches a weekend. So you're not really able to sort of closely follow your team, and being sort of 4-hour drive away from Glasgow is not often I could get, parents could get us down there and actually see games. So it's a bit of a weird one. We sort of followed it via the radio, and I don't know if this was a thing in Australia, but teletext, you brought up the punching a number on a control and news comes up on your TV. This makes me sound absolutely ancient. But yeah, that, and then obviously highlights packages, and you're really lucky you might get the odd game, the odd big game or cup finals, obviously we're showing live. So yeah, that's kind of that's a kind of weird way around of being a Celtic fan. And I sort of, I guess you guys have talked about sort of videos getting sent out from Scotland. I know Anthony's spoken about this on our show. Is like, you had to wait for the videotape to be sent from Scotland so that you could stick it on and watch the match. But it's not quite as, I guess it was not quite as remote as that, but it was a bit of a remoteness in terms of being 4 hours up the road from Glasgow. You never really felt that, you couldn't go down to games, and it wasn't that easy. And I think my earliest memory of a game that stands out is the 1985 Cup final, and not because I watched it live on the telly or was even lucky enough to go. My auntie, who's only a few years older than me, my dad's youngest sister, she was a bit of a mistake. She came around, she came along many years after her, my auntie and my dad, but she's only about 8 years older than me. She she showed us a videotape of the final. So that sort of drenched 1985 final when Davy Provan curled that, brilliant one in the top corner, and then McGarvey headed in to win it 2-1, and I think Stuart Beattie scored
Yeah.
earlier for United. She taped that off the telly, and so she was a Celtic fan as well, bizarrely. And so she showed me and my brother, and I don't know, we were already interested in Celtic by that point, but I think that's the thing that sort of brought it to life. It was a game we weren't so involved as we knew that when that game was on, and I don't know how long after it was. It's probably later on in 85 or maybe very early in 86, but distinctly remember watching that game, and that was us. We were hooked. And then, everything else from there. And folks lucky, jumped on it. And even though it was hard to get to games and there wasn't a lot of cash floating around, we got sporadically down to Celtic Park over the years. And as a kid, you just immerse yourself in everything. So it's shirts and books and videos and the whole lot. So embedded from a young age. And sort of I've never lived in Glasgow, right? So the closest I've ever lived in is the other Perth, which is still probably a couple hours away. So I've always had to watch from afar, and obviously coming down here for the last 10 years, even further.
It's funny you say that sort of stuff, because I look at it and go, yeah, what Anthony was telling you, for us, it was the same deal over here. It was like we had the CSC, the Melbourne #1 back in the day, and I was at the Celtic Club here in Melbourne, and then you'd have Celtic fans that get it one day on the weekend, Arsenal fans that get it on the next weekend. They were the two clubs based out of there that have their supporters clubs there, and you'd go in, you get the videotapes, you'd watch 3 or 4 games in a weekend, and then basically it'd be, okay, now what? And then suddenly they had the newspaper British Football Week that came out every week, but the results in that were a week behind. So say if we were playing in an Old Firm game, at the time it was Old Firm, obviously, back in the 90s and early 2000s or whatever it would have been, unless the game was being shown on SBS here, it was like you had to go to the newsagent, buy that I think it was every Tuesday that came out, a couple of bucks, like $4 or $5 for it, get it, flip to the Scottish section, few articles, few see results and go, oh, okay, that's what happened 2 weeks ago. And then wait another 2 weeks for the tapes to get here so you could actually watch the games at the CSC. So yeah, it was a little bit easier for you, even though you were 4 hours up the road. But yeah, it's good fun, that the things we used to do back in the like 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, to follow our club.
Absolutely.
Being out of that Goldfish Bowl in Glasgow, it's a good thing and a bad thing, I suppose. But yeah,
You definitely got a different perspective not being immersed in it day in, day out, week in, week out. So, but yeah, always, once I had the opportunity to go relatively regularly, I was sort of under my own steam. There was a good period where I went, I had a season ticket and I was there pretty regularly.
That's good. So we've recently had a change of manager at Celtic. So how do you look back on Andrew's time at the club, Paul?
Yeah, look, nothing but positively. Disappointing that he went, and not in the manner he went. Really, a lot of people got hung up on that. But as I said on the Monday show the other week, when just after the news officially broke, it's the nature of the game these days, right? So if you're successful, you'll be poached by not necessarily bigger clubs, because I don't think there are too many bigger globally than us, but certainly richer clubs with a better league to play in and more competitive platform. So he's a builder. It was a project. I don't think that project, well, by no means was the project done. I think a 3 or 4 year project with Andrew would have been amazing. It would have been great to see how he took that on to the next step. But I'm long enough in the tooth, as I sort of just illustrated by mentioning teletext and the radio, to have seen a lot worse than a treble-winning manager leave a young, well-contracted squad with a ton of cash in the bank. So without harping on about the 90s and stuff, this is a minor blip in terms of something to get over. It would have been amazing if he'd stayed. The 2 years were brilliant. He really sort of unified the club. And I know people think there was a bit of, hollowness in that in terms of how he left. But I don't, you know, at the end of the day, we needed to be unified as a support and a club. Like the COVID season, we all remember sort of the protests outside the ground and fences being tipped over and all the other nonsense. We don't, it's kind of, if you look back to those times, it's kind of remarkable how quickly he turned that around. And that's really between what he said and what he did. And they all worked together and we all bought in, we all got on board. We all hoped it would be a longer journey. It wasn't. But yeah, I've only got positive sort of feelings and memories of it. It'll go down as, those 2 seasons will go down as amongst my most enjoyable watching Celtic, and having not, other than the Sydney games, which were a bit of a washout, let's be honest. Having not seen any of the competitive matches to say that's one of my favourite seasons in, nearly 40 years of watching, being a Celtic fan, it says a lot about what he delivered and how he went about his business. So yeah, disappointing he's gone, but we move on.
100% agree with you. It's been probably a couple of the most enjoyable seasons in my time following Celtic, along with the Invincible treble season and stuff like that. But yeah, it's one where, as I was saying, I've said a few times on the pod that it's like Ange has left a team that was really likable, if that makes sense. Like, there wasn't many dickhead players in the team that you didn't really like, and you're like, don't come near the team. It's like every one of them, you can buy and go, that's our guy, that's our player. And it's the buy-in. And as you were saying, Paul, about off the back of the COVID season, the link between the fans, the players, the board, the club in general, we got our club back. So Andrew was really good for the club, and yeah, we move on basically. But
Absolutely.
what are you looking forward to most with Brendan returning to the club?
So I think it's less about, and this isn't supposed to be a diss on Brennan. I'm on record as saying I thought he was the strongest of the candidates that were linked. So, but it's less about Brendan per se, and more about where we are as a club. Ange's left us in a really good position squad wise. Yes, we've sold Jota, but we've secured Kyogo. There's a ton of cash in the bank now. If you believe the rumours, it was 30 mil before Jota's sale. The guts of 20 million will be there. You can talk about nets because we've paid 6.5 out, but we paid six. Some of that 6.5 has been previously paid. Some of it's probably still due, but give or take, there's the best part of another 20. So for me, that if there's 50 mil in the pot, I want to see it all paid, all spent on the playing squad. As we've touched on other shows, that will be a mix of wages and fees. But I can't remember a time where we've been this well positioned ahead of a new season. Like, you don't get a new manager coming in this good with this good a position. It doesn't usually happen, because usually you got a new manager because you're off the back of a failure of a season. It's rare that you win a treble and your manager is poached and the new guy's got the same squad or the cash for any of them that go, and they're all on long contracts. They're all on a high because they've just won a treble, or in some cases 5 trophies in 6 years. And if we go, without skipping over Brendan Rodgers, he's obviously got he's got a really good reputation, well-deserved reputation of developing players, especially young players. It was the best thing he did when he was here the first time. He's done it elsewhere, and I expect him to do it again. So, we've got a really young squad that's already hit some good heights already. I think the opportunity is there under Rodgers to go to another level. And that's the most exciting thing for me. He's obviously not coming just to dominate in Scotland. He's done that. You don't go backwards for that. So he's obviously coming with intent to the Champions League. He's not daft. He's been in the Premier League. He knows that takes cash. The board have presumably promised that and backed him in. So otherwise he wouldn't have come, right? So he's a lot of things, but he's not daft. So all up, I think we're in a really good position. And if we think back to Celtic fans, there's been a few times over the relatively recent history where we've had opportunities to really put the foot on the gas and pull away from our opponents in Scotland and set a new bar, and we haven't quite done it for one reason or another. To me, this seems like we're the cusp of doing that again, and for the first time in a long time, it looks like we're actually at that level. So exciting times as far as I'm concerned, and hopefully we get it done this time.
We've had numerous opportunities over the years to strengthen from a position of power, and we never have seemed to do it. So the fact that not only, as you said, do we have a young squad, long-term contracts, have just won a treble, but then we got 30 million in the bank plus the Jota money coming in. If we put all that 50 million in, and then the guys across the city are just like in the bargain basement looking at freebies and loans and whatever, then we've been talking about on the pod for ages about strengthening, building a squad for Europe, which in turn means it will take care of itself in Scotland. We're at that position where we can actually strengthen from a position for power. And realistically, if you get 4 players at 7.5 million, those are all starting quality European level players for our club in the Carter Vickers and Jota sort of mold. Look at the daylight just increase between the two teams in Glasgow as well. So it's going to be we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I certainly think that's what we should. And the thing is, we're always going to refer ourselves to them, but this is a real opportunity to stop looking back at Scotland. And like you say, position for Europe, you do that and you get that right. Scotland should take care of itself, right? Without being complacent. The players and the manager still, we can become more complacent as fans. The players and managers still have to front up week in, week out and do the work. But if you build a squad at that level, and you get the culture right, and that's one of the things I understood brilliantly. And you talked about the squad, no dickheads, and we talk about the no dickheads rule in Australia all the time, right? You go to a party and you say, "Oh, can I bring my mate?" Well, if he's not a dickhead, you can bring him, right? So that's a pretty Aussie cultural thing. And I think Ange sort of really led his squad in recruitment like that. He talked a lot about not just hiring good players, they were 10 a penny, but good humans and people that are going to fit into the club and his sort of way of working, and we've got a good base on that. And look, Rogers made a similar comment in his press conference where he said, if I'll spend time with all the players, and give them an opportunity, and if they want to buy in and work hard, they've got my full support, and I'll care for them. If they don't care, I won't care, and they're gone. So there'll be a fair amount of similarity in terms of how they set their teams out and play offensively and direct and want to create chances and score goals. But I think culturally they're not too dissimilar in terms of how they want their squads to sort of interact and sort of develop as a group of people, as a group of young men, as well as football players.
Well, something Rogers said in his I think it was one of his first press conferences. I don't know if it was with the fan media or if it was with the on the club's thing, I can't remember, or with the normal press, but he mentioned that first time around at the club to now, the structure behind the scenes has improved a lot and it's a lot more modern. So what's your take, Paul, on the current club structure? Do you think Celtic as a club, especially with Ange moving on and keeping that consistency going, do we need to have a director of football at the club, or are you happy with the current setup where it's driven by the manager? What's your overall thoughts on it?
Look, we've touched on this a few of the pods. I think all the shows have maybe touched on the director of football role to some degree or another. There's pros and cons, right? So the main pro that most people suggest about having a director of football is that they oversee the full football operation from youth to top team and scouting, the whole works, which is a huge operation these days. And they sort of put in the foundations so that if a manager leaves, then the framework of the club doesn't change. And you can just rehire and keep that continuity. I guess that's fine in principle, but we talk about great players getting poached and great managers getting poached. What's to stop a great director of football being poached as well? So then you kind of back in the same boat. I think it seems to me, and I think a lot of people are sort of starting to feel this, that Mark Law's sort of almost doing a bit of a de facto director of football role. There's certainly football. The football division seems to be more cohesive. Brendan talked a lot about that, the foundation of that already being there. Mark doing a good job here, and about this, we're tapping into markets that weren't being tapped into previously. He mentioned, I think it was in the fan media, he mentioned that the previous recruitment model was confused, which I think was him being a little bit diplomatic and saying, essentially it sounded like, he was asking for one thing and other people were delivering something else, and there wasn't any kind of real strategy or plan, and that certainly seems to have changed, and I think there was a concern that Ange was sort of this godlike manager in terms of gets all the power and there sort of makes all the decision making. But I think with him moving on and pretty much everybody staying, that was maybe overstated. I think this certainly looks like there's a football division that, the fact we're still tapping into the Australian market with Tilio, and obviously the Korean market with Yang is, heavily being well, I don't think it's a rumor. We're definitely interested because he's pretty much trying to force his way out of his club. So we're still in those same markets. Now, obviously, we'd have probably been well down the road with those, not knowing that Ange was definitely going. But the fact that Rodgers has come in and happy to work within that framework suggests to me that he's really happy of how that's all set up. Otherwise, he wouldn't be, ultimately the manager doesn't carry 100% responsibility, but given what seems to be rumored last time about ended up with players that he didn't really want or need, he's not going to come back and accept players like Tilio and Hom and maybe Yang, who have clearly been scouted for a while. He's not scouted them in the last 2 weeks. So the fact that he's happy for us to continue to move forward on that basis means that there's a full, and he basically, you're right, he expressed that in the press conference. He's happy and comfortable with what the structure that's there for that part of the football operation, which is identifying players, scouting, getting deals done, and Nicholson's done a great job in terms of not just fronting up with the cash, but actually getting these deals done and over the line pretty quickly. So it seems like we've got that, without being blunt, it seems like we've got our shit together with that regard, more than we have in, I can't think of a time where we've had a better grip on all of that sort of stuff. And we've got what seems like a continuity and strategical plan that is moving forward on transfer. So long may it continue. Do we need an actual director of football? Maybe. But as I say, if that person gets poached, then you potentially cause the same disarray as it could be if we don't and managers move on. So I think it's about getting all the parts of the football operation right. Get youth working properly, get scouting working properly, get data analytics working properly, get nutrition and health and fitness and all of that. If they're all working well, and then the money men are getting deals done, and we're managing assets properly out the other way. So under Rodgers' first spell, some players didn't go when the peak time to sell them was. Cham, probably best example. If we look at our neighbours across the city, they've been hopeless at that, and it's really going to start to hurt them in terms of asset management. So we need to, we've done well with Jota, and we did well with Edouard, and we did well with Ayer, and even Christie, I think, was a pretty good deal given how little time was on his contract, and I think we got a bonus for him getting promoted as well. So it seems like the contract stuff is being done well. So if we keep on that regard, yeah, it bodes well for the future.
Yep, have to agree with you on that. So I was going to ask you, how do you think our recruitment has been over the last 12 to 18 months, and which players at the club do you think will be moving on in the next 6 to 12 months? I think you may have touched on that already on the pot noodle on Wednesday last week. We've touched on this, but if you just want to go over that again, then leave it with you.
Yeah, look, it's difficult. So I think in terms of the recruitment's been great. For the most part, recruitment has been really, really good. I can't think of a time when we've got consistently as many good players in the door, even players that haven't stuck around for a very long time. I think of like Giacomakis and Juranovic. They were cult heroes. People absolutely loved them. People are still moaning that we've let those guys go. But we brought them in. They did a job. They absolutely did a job, and they helped us get things moving under Ange. But they were older guys. They were in their late 20s. And we've turned them over, taken a bit of a fee, made a bit of a profit on both. Not the profits that maybe some of us thought was possible, but we certainly made a profit on them. And we've, well, in Juranovic's case, unbelievably, because he thought he was one of the best players at the club. I think we've definitely upgraded with Johnson. He's been great since he came in, and he's only 24, and he's got so much upside. And there was an argument that said, like, if Kyogo got injured, we could have been in the shit, and that's potentially true. But we touched on it in the pot noodle. I think Maeda could have filled in through the middle, and he certainly played there for Japan and there's some of his Japanese clubs as well. So I think generally recruitment's been pretty good. You're always going to have a few misses, but it tends to be the misses have been loans with options, and we've decided not to take those options and sent them back. So the one that you probably stands out is maybe not, have been reasonably expensive and not quite worked out is probably Bernabei. But I think there's a player in there. I just, I don't know if it'd be interesting to see if Rodgers can get a tune out of him. I'm not completely discounting him yet. There's obviously a player there. I just don't know if it's a left back. So general recruitment's been really good. In terms of moving on, I guess there's a mixture of who I think and who do I think we can afford to move on. We've got to move some dead wood. All those loanees, most of them need to go because it's just however small their wages are, and some of them, I guess, Ajeti's wage, for example, is probably reasonably hefty. We just need them. We just need to cut our losses and get them off the bill. If we can get a fee for any of them, great. But just take what we can get and get rid. We've obviously lost Jota. I think we might lose one more, potentially. Great, we've tied down Kyogo. That was a big one that was heavily rumoured. Now,
I'll tell you who I think will be the other one to go. Everyone's talking up. It's going to be Hatate. It's going to be O'Reilly. I think it'll be Turnbull. He's got 12 months left on his contract.
Look, I think he should go. I know I've heard people say, "Oh, he's a 10, so he fits Rodgers' systems better," and that's right. He is, but he isn't at the level, right? I'd rather play Hatate in a 10, even though he's more of an 8. I'd
rather play Kelmack in a 10 over him.
Well, yeah, and Haksabanovic can play there. So yeah, like the one that worries me and seems to be flip-flopping, because I don't think people really know what's going to happen with him, is Abada, right? So a lot of fans, Abada seems to be a guy who splits the support pretty heavily. I see comments on Twitter that, he's rubbish, we need him out, take what you can get for him. I'll be honest, I have no idea what those people, what they're watching, right? Yes, he isn't always the most technical in terms of having the ball under control. I think that's definitely got better in his 2 seasons. But that's a guy who scores a phenomenal amount of goals, is incredibly difficult to pick up in the box. And a bit like Kyogo, you never see him, and then he's out of nowhere, and he's Kyogo, you just never see him, and then he scores. Abada, you sort of, is he on it? Is it on at his days? Like, he's missed a few touches, he's miscontrolled something, and then suddenly he's lost his marker, and he's scored a screamer, or he's ghosted in, and he's finished. I think his ceiling is incredibly high at only 21. We touched on the point earlier about players developing and getting game time, and obviously a player like Tilio has played a lot of game time at only 21. I feel like Abada's in a similar kind of boat. Sporting Lisbon were supposedly interested in, and then apparently now not interested. I think there's genuine interest from Ajax. He didn't sign an extension, and people have taken that lack of signing an extension that he's definitely off this summer. He's still got 3 years on his deal. He's contracted till 2026. So unless he's really pissed off, and the reports coming out at the end of the last season, or the end of the season just gone, said he was quite happy, unless he's hugely upset or throwing his toys out the pram or trying to force a move. If Rodgers is great with young players, like we said, he's more arm around the shoulder than Ange. Ange is a bit standoffish and doesn't want to build too much of a personal connection with his players because he wants to be able to look at things objectively. Rodgers is less like that. Like, he'll make the hard decisions, but he does want to connect with his players. That's part of what he's into. So if he has a heart-to-heart with Abada, and I think we could easily see Abada stay for another season. And if he does, I think he's the first pick for the right wing role for now. Tilio is going to have to battle him for that jersey, and having Tilio breathing down Abada's neck is just only going to push him to another level. So, 2 21-year-olds battling out, I think it'd be amazing. And I really hope he doesn't go, but it sounds like he might. I think one of Hatate or O'Reilly might go. It'd be great if we can hold on to both, but if one of them goes at their level of ability and age and level of contract they've signed, that's another fat fee. And if that's another fat fee, then you are going to go and pay, I think, break the club record fee, 12, 15, 16 million on a fee, and make them, if not the top earner, then close to the top earner, and really level up. So it's one of those. Ange told us, don't get too attached to your heroes. And we thought he meant players, but he obviously meant himself as well. And that's kind of where I'm at, right? So, as a kid, you love your heroes and you're lucky because back then players stayed around for a long time. And then you're in your teens and 20s and Larson stays for an age. Then you grow up and you're a little bit more circumspect and cynical, and players start leaving all the time. And here we go. They'll go,
Here we
come
go
in,
again.
do a job for my club, make a profit on you, turn them around, bring another one in. Yeah, so that's my view on it, I think. But I think there'll be a bit more turnover to come, and probably more than we were necessarily expecting. Like I said in the pot noodle, it's only 4.5 weeks ago since we won the cup final. So yeah, 6 weeks ago, we probably thought we had a real steady squad, same manager, add one or two, away we go. Not quite.
Well, what you're saying about Abada makes perfect sense because it reminds me of if you got Abada with Tilio at his heels, it's the same as when you had Forrest and Paddy Roberts challenging each other for that right wing spot. And on top of that, you go, I can understand why Abada didn't sign a new contract because let's be honest, you come here, Golden Boy nominee or something like that, you expect him to be get a good chance in the team. And basically you've got Jota and Maeda starting in here. So you're basically relegated to a backup role. If you've got 3 years on your deal, why would you sign an extension when you're like, I'm just a backup? Like either give me a chance or I'm not going to sign. Well, now with Jota moving on, you look at it and go, and I spoke about this on the pot noodle as well, that I like to have that production line where you've got your starter, you've got your backup, and then when your starter gets sold for big money, the backup steps up to be your main guy, and then you replace him. And that's exactly what we've done here. Jota's moved on, Abada moves up to the starter, Tilio comes into the backup. Now Tilio pushes Abada, so they're improving each other, and then you end up with in 12 months' time, Abada goes to be sold. Well, you'll get 30 plus for him, you'd think, because he's still got a long-term contract. So that's that production line we talk about in the player trading model. So yeah, perfect sense. So what areas of the team do you think we need to strengthen going into the season? I know we touched on the pot noodle as well, but let's get your deep dive into that.
It's a bit of a weird one, right? So on the face of it, we talk a lot about strength and depth and it being, pretty heavily covered. But then a few players, one or two players miss out, and then suddenly you look a bit light. Obviously, we've lost Aaron Moy, Jota's gone. We might lose one or two others. I'm not desperate for a new goalkeeper, but if there was one available, then I certainly think we probably need one, to your point, in the pipeline that's ready to step up next season. So Joe Hart's on a 3-year deal. I'd quite like for that to be extended, but then for it to flip and him be the backup next season, because he's been amazing for the squad. But is he Champions League level still? I think he might have one season at it, but we probably need to upgrade that. But it's not, for me, it's not a priority this window. Maybe next window, getting ready for next season. I think we need a Champions League ready number 10. So somebody can see all of those Kyogo runs, and we touched on it, and that might be Raider. It might be somebody else, but that's, I think, in a creative role which can also add some goals. I think that's worth spending money on. We probably need another striker, just to put a bit of pressure on Kyogo and to be a solid. I think always a great prospect, but do you want to go into a season fighting in Europe and domestically as him your main backup? I'm with no one behind him, really. I'm not 100% comfortable with that. If Kyogo gets a bad injury, then it's a lot to ask of a young player. So Meira can fill in there, but I would like to see another striker potentially. We'd probably see another winger. I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, we're looking at Yang. I wouldn't be surprised to see another winger. Left back's an interesting one. I think, GT's been amazing, but is he going to fit the system as well as under Rodgers? I don't know. Potentially, Rodgers has played around with inverted fullbacks, and Greg was at his absolute peak coming in and filling up that extra space and Lincoln play high up the pitch. There's a possibility. I certainly think we need cover at left back. If it's not a direct replacement for GT, it's definitely got to be breathing down his neck. And then we do need another centre back. Now, do we out and out replace Starfelt with better quality again? It could be a tallish order, depending on how much we spend elsewhere. But we certainly need better backup than Kobayashi and Welsh. So again, if you've got a really quality third centre back, then him and Starfelt can battle it out, or potentially we can play three at the back, or a bit of variation. So, and that's just if we don't lose anyone else. So if we lose anyone else, we obviously need to add a bit more in. But yeah, that's so that like, you know, it says to me there's 3 or 4, potentially even 5 over a 12-month period. It's not, I'm not expecting all of that right now, but certainly over this window, the next window, and then next summer. Or winter if you're Australian.
Got a doozy of a question for you here. How do you think VAR has worked in Scotland so far, and what needs to be done to improve it?
So, yeah. I could go forever. No, look, I think
it's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, look, I'm glad we've got it. That's the first thing, right? It's by no means perfect. Ultimately, it's the people using it that's the issue, and kind of how it's been applied, right? So, to be a forward-looking league, you've got to have it, right? So that's the first thing. I'm glad we've got it. There's probably a case for. I don't think that the match officials that are in the middle need to be the people operating VAR, right? We've got a relatively small pool of top class, inverted commas, refs, and their ability is dubious at best, right? So why are we spreading them even more thinly by sticking some of them in the studio? There must be plenty of refs that have hung up their whistles in various parts of the globe that would come to Scotland for a season and sit in a studio every weekend and make decisions. And you could get, I'm not saying you get like the best refs on the planet ever, but you could probably tempt a few out of retirement to come and have a year in Scotland. And then you've got people from another area, which, you know, I don't want a tinfoil hat on in terms of biasness, but, you know, you got fresh eyes looking at things. It's automatically going to be, you know, better than the goldfish, because at the end of the day, refs, even if they don't mean it, they run up against the same players constantly because it's a small league that plays each other 4 times. So they are, you know, the players meet each other all the time. The refs are even more so. So if there's any little niggle, or, you know, that player's annoying or whatever, that plays into their bias. So it doesn't necessarily, you know, depend on, you know, which school they went to or which, you know, church they went to or whatever. Like it's more about, you know,
hand or whatever.
Yeah. So look, I think, has it gone well? It's not gone brilliantly. Has it got better over the course of the season? I think it probably has done a bit. The biggest thing is it's sort of taken too long. So they need to be smarter. Like when they show a replay and you or I can go, well, it's a penalty or it's a foul or it isn't, in one view, and they look at it 6 times. For
90 seconds past, then they call the ref over.
It's just daft, right? So I think like common sense approach says it can be better. My biggest thing is make them up like rugby union, and then at least it's transparent. You know, they are accountable. At the end of the day, it's an entertainment. You know, we all invest way more than just, you know, go to the movies. Like, you know, it's a passion, it's a love, it's, you know, lifetime. But it's ultimately an entertainment, a form of entertainment. So get some transparency in there. Like at the end of the day, if the ref says, you know, he speaks to his VAR, and the two of them have a conversation and they make a decision, we might not agree with that decision, but at least if we can follow the rationale, I can see why they made it. I disagree with, you know, their thinking on it, but I understand how they came to that decision. Whereas at the minute, some of these decisions are so ludicrous, you've got absolutely no idea how they got to that decision. So it's a work in progress. Look, leagues like EPL that have had it for longer have still got VAR controversy week in, week out. But look, it's here to stay. I think we should have it. hopefully we can get it working a little bit better and it doesn't break up the game. But yeah, that's probably more than I wanted to say on it, and best left there for now, I think.
Fair enough. So we'll get into the fun questions. So, other than Henrik Larsson, who would be your all-time favourite Celtic player and why?
It's quite an easy one for me, actually, because he's probably right up there with Larsson, and they've probably got it jointly. So for me, it's the maestro Paul McStay. He's the first player. Like, obviously, I said that I became a Celtic fan in the early to mid 80s, and yeah, he was a young player at that time. But very quickly, like the first season I can remember being all in invested, and can remember pretty much, or certainly remember, I wouldn't remember every game now, but I remember being involved in watching highlights and being across the scores and being completely invested in the side week in, week out. First season for me of that was the centenary year, 87-88, won the double. And McStay was obviously at the heart of that team in the midfield. Just that we talked about Armoy earlier on the pot noodle in terms of just being a bit of a Rolls Royce of a player, and that for me that's McStay. Like, never look flustered, great control, brilliant range of passing, could hit a great strike from in or outside around the box, scored some great goals, and just Celtic through and through. Like, his whole family, history goes back. There's been McStays in the Celtic story for since pretty much almost day one. And had the opportunity to go, and probably should have gone. Like, he had the opportunity to go to Serie
Times.
A, but there was a point where it was the end of, I can't remember which season it might have been, the end of it was the early 90s when we were absolutely bloody dreadful, and he took his last game of the season, he took his shirt and he threw it into the jungle, as it was at the time, the old standing jungle across the main stand, and everybody took that as basically he was off. And I don't know what happened, if he had a change of heart or whatever, but the rumor was heavily, I can't remember the club that he was linked with, but he was heavily rumored to be going to Serie A. And to be honest, as a Celtic fan, we were delighted that he stayed. But if I take my Celtic hat off, he probably should have gone. Right? He was that kind of Serie A at the time was the best league in Europe. He was easily good enough to operate at that level. He's got, I think, 60, 70, maybe 70 odd Scotland caps. I think he's one of the most capped Celtic players of all time. But yeah, he stayed during a bloody dreadful period. Like, he had a successful early period of his career, but then once he became skipper, I think he only won that one Scottish Cup as captain in '95. I'm glad he got that, because he definitely deserved it. But yeah, between sort of him and John Collins, they sort of dragged that team around for a few. But that period, speaking about glory hunting, that period was bloody awful to be a Celtic fan. So I'm glad I got the centenary year to sort of hook me in, because Celtic sort of catfished me with that. So we got, I'm an 11-year-old kid or something. We've won the double in our centenary year. It's sort of historic, like, it's sort of absolute legendary, the stuff of legends. It's just incredible. Billy McNeil back as second spell as manager, and famous legend of the club, and it all just fell into place. They'd spent a fortune, and we cobbled together a bunch of sort of like a ragtag bunch from here, there, and everywhere. Mick McCarthy and Billy Stark and all these players that we sort of cobbled together. Chris Morris. What a team, though! An absolute, just a proper team, and that's also, I think, just that, it's that kind of season that sets you as a Celtic fan for life. Something embeds that in you that young, and probably that is what kind of, when I needed that in the locker to be able to cope with the next 9 years, which we all know are absolutely horrific. So yeah, Paul McStay by some distance is my other than Larsson, my all-time Celt in my era, anyway.
So back of that then. So, of all the people you've seen play for Celtic in your lifetime, who would be the top 5 players that you've seen? If you're building like a five-a-side team or something like that.
Hard. This is really hard, especially without much prep. So let's just gut feel it. I'll miss some people, but so you obviously got Larsson.
Rattle off 6 or 7 then, and you have some special mentions or a bench.
So yeah, you've got, look, you'd have Larsson, you'd have You'd have Paul McStay. You'd have goalies. Lucky, I've seen a few good ones. Probably have either. Probably Boric might shade Forster, but one of those two. If you're having a pick and a keeper, I absolutely loved Paul Elliott. He was only around for a little while, but I absolutely loved Paul Elliott. He was a proper sort of footballer at centre half. Loved him. But then you've got guys like Miyabi, who's just a warrior. Nakamura, what a player. On Naka, actually, tell if I'm allowed to do this. I'll just a couple of stories about Naka. So I lived in Leeds for a good chunk of my 20s, and I was a season ticket holder for some of that time. And I was lucky enough to be at both Champions League games against Man United when Naka scored in both of them. So I think it was 2005, 2006, something like that. I think 2006. So the away tie, the away tie in at Old Trafford, I was working with a guy at the time who was a big United fan, and he managed to get us a pair of tickets for that match in the United. So I was in the United. So I managed to keep myself in my seat just about when Naka bent that one in, and I think we lost 3-2 in the end. So, and he was threatening to I was like, you can't joke about this, mate. This is ridiculous. I'll get lynched. And then luckily enough, I was I think I had my season ticket in my name, but I wasn't. I'd sort of, because it was getting harder and harder to come up, I'd sort of given it to one of the guys in my local supporters club back in Scotland. So I could get it now and again, but certainly a big game like that was hard to get for. But anyway, I managed to I was due to go on a work training course. I looked at all the dates, and it was up in Glasgow, right? So I looked at all the dates, and I found one of the courses that fell on that 2-day period that the game was on the Wednesday night. So I booked myself on this course. It was a 2 or 3 day course, right? And work also got us into, you can book into the Hilton Hotel in Glasgow, which is at the time, I don't know what it happens now, but at the time, that's where Celtic, the whole team, the squad booked in the night before a game. So they were all there, right? So I booked into the hotel for this training course. They were there. I was on the phone. I was like messaging my mom and phoning. I'm like, everybody, I'm up. I'm in Glasgow. Please, somebody find me a ticket for this bloody match. Anyway, I managed to get a brief for the game. And yeah, what a match, obviously. Naka. So two of my picks, Naka and Boric, both immense that night. Boric obviously saved the penalty late on. And then Naka bent in, probably the best free kick. Certainly the best free kick I've ever seen in the flesh. And probably one of the best I've ever seen in any way. And then and I was also lucky enough to be in the ground the night that he bent that one in against Rangers, that just moved in all directions.
Different crossing goal one.
And then obviously Novo equalised, and then the late goal by Vengorov Hesseling. It's just a placement. They're like I've lucky enough to been in there for Champions League nights and all sorts, but that was one of the loudest nights I can remember at Celtic Park. It was just incredible. So yeah, Naka for sure. I don't know, like some of the more modern guys, Rogic, obviously, for an Aussie podcast, Rogic was just an incredible talent. Guys like Musa, just anyone that sort of gets in about it and thumps the Huns, you kind of get to love pretty quickly. Bruni's a legend. Kalmak's you can go on and on and on, and like this, it's really hard, especially without much prep. But yeah, lucky enough to have seen after a pretty desolate period, and even back then, we saw some good players like Van Hooijdonk and Cadet and De Canio and Andy Tom. There's some really good players. Like, and to be honest, with those players, we should have been doing better. Like, I kind of look back on that, and I was pretty young back then. I kind of look back now, going, "How were we so shit back then when we had some incredible?" Like, I don't know really. Like, it's a weird one. Obviously, there's a big discrepancy in cash and all of that, but I feel like there was a period where it's always been Celtic's DNA to not just win, but win attractively, and Brendan Rodgers mentioned it in his press conference. You've got to win stylistically a certain way, but I feel like there was a good chunk of our certainly the period in my sort of first kind of decade, I guess, of sport supporting Celtic and watching closely is we kind of got that around the wrong way. We looked great on the eye, but we couldn't get results.
There was no substance to our style, basically.
Yeah, you need to marry both, and yeah, it was a bit disappointing. And obviously guys like Chris Sutton and John Hartson and that whole team that O'Neill built, Stan Petrov, what a player. Again, I was lucky enough I was in Seville. I was at the ground, got a ticket for that as well. So some really lucky, some incredible experiences. And that's a weird season because I look back on that with a fond memory that the run we went on and all of that and how close we got. And you sort of forget we won nothing, right? It's funny, we mock Rangers in terms of what they did exactly the same. They pretty much won nothing. And but it didn't feel like that. Do you know what I mean? It didn't really feel like that at the time. And as if you look in the record books, it says Rangers they won a treble that year. But whilst there was disappointment, I felt like is that thing. I don't want to trade European success for domestic success. I want both. And yeah, you might trade a cup or whatever. But looking like at the time, as disappointing as it was, there was definitely a pride in operating at that level and getting as close as we did. And that was a great Porto side. Obviously, they went on and won the Champions League the following year. But yeah, to be in Seville for that and just the pilgrimage that it became and the day out and the run up to it. Again, I don't know if I've got time to tell the story, but I've got a funny story from Seville, which so I like my mum is a huge Celtic fan. She's still a season ticket holder. She still gets all the time. And I sort of quite young at the time. I was probably only been, I think, working for a year or two after university when that game was on. So maybe 3. But I didn't have much money because I was pretty much spending all. You're like in your early 20s, you spend it and you earn it and you spend it and you earn it and you spend it. Anyway,
money, yeah.
Yeah. So, but once we got, I was like, I'm going to go. And then my mum managed to get us a ticket through the local club. So Fraserburgh FC, my local sort of Highland League side, who, we played a friendly, Celtic played a friendly the other, just at the weekend there for a charity match. We know the now chairman. He was on the board at the time, but he's now the chairman. And all, like, when a club gets to a European final, all clubs in the system get a pocket of allocation of tickets for a European final. So Fraserburgh FC in the 5th tier of Scottish football had a wee batch of tickets. And so my mum managed to secure 2 tickets out of their little batch of tickets. Maybe, I don't know, that had 10, 15, 20 tickets. Anyway, we got 2 of them. So now you had to find your way there. So, it was trains, planes, automobiles, couldn't get to Seville, no accommodation, no transport. So there was like holiday companies doing package trips to the Algarve, so over the border into Portugal. So you flew out a 3 or 4 day trip, you fly into the Algarve, just into some like family tourist resort, and then on the day of the match, they bust you over first thing in the morning. You got all day in the city of Seville, mingle around, have a beer, take in the atmosphere, walk to the game, and then the bus picks you up outside, a bit from the ground, takes you back to Portugal. So anyway, that's what we did. But the funniest bit of the day, so we knew some people from the supporters club and stuff that were there, but essentially I was there, like, the main person that was my mum, right? So we are in the main square in Seville, and there's Tims everywhere. It's green and white as far as I can see. There's a few pockets of Porto fans there, sort of looking a bit bewildered, but enjoying themselves as well. Anyway, we're in a bar outside. Beautiful, it was boiling, beautiful weather. No toilet drinking while we were there. So we're having a few beers, and my mum says, "I think that's Billy Connolly." And I went, "Oh, yeah, very fucking good." It was Billy Connolly, right? So obviously, well-known Celtic fan, Billy Connolly. He's a good distance away, right? And I mean a good distance away. Like, there's a big square, and he's at least halfway across it. So I was like, "Oh, it is." And before I said, "Oh, it is," she's off, right? And even 20 years ago, she wasn't the most mobile, but I've never seen her move so quick, right? So my mom's like, famous people she likes and Celtic players and stuff. She loves a photo. Before the days before a selfie, she was trying to get somebody else to take a photo or an autograph or whatever. Anyway, she's fucking set off. All 5'2" of her and whatever, running around like as close as she could get. She can't run, but close as she could have got to run. Anyway, she's beelining for Connolly, and he's a fair bit younger as well, and he's walking at a reasonable lick, and she's kind of over his shoulder, so he can't really see her coming. But she's paying zero attention to anything other than beelining for Billy Connolly. She walked into the back end of a horse and ended on her arse. I couldn't stop laughing. She ended up on her backside. She'd walked into the back end of a police horse, or the horse and carts that take people around in these tours. I was nearly doubled over laughing. It's absolutely brilliant. Anyway, she'll be she'll listen to this, no doubt. And she'll no doubt be delighted that I've told that story. But it was the funniest thing that happened while I was in Seville, and still a memorable one.
That's brilliant. I was going to ask you what are some of the most memorable games you've seen, but you've rattled off a bunch you've been to. So we'll skip to the last one I've got on the list here. Was other than Messi and Ronaldo, who would be the one player that you've seen play during your lifetime and you wish that they could have signed for Celtic? But just picture like we're Scrooge McDuck. We've got endless money. I'm saying we don't have oil money. It's Scrooge, whatever. And we can spend it on whoever you want. Who would it be and why? You can go a couple if you want.
So there's two that immediately jump out at me, and I'll miss some brilliant ones as well. But Maldini, just probably the best defender in my lifetime.
It's the second time he's come up in that one, so there you go.
Just everything you want in a defender. Just an absolute superstar. And probably if I'm looking at somebody more creative and further forward, I'd say Zidane. Just again, an absolute next level player. Pirlo, you go there. The original Ronaldo. If you're talking modern, doesn't get much better than Haaland at the minute. But yeah,
my favorite answer I've ever had for that was Juan Roman Riquelme.
He's a character and some player. A bit of a flawed genius. Look, the absolute one for me. Who did you say I couldn't have? I couldn't have Messi or Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Diego Maradona. Then absolutely, like he's the GOAT for me. The absolute GOAT, above Pele, above those guys. I absolutely loved Maradona. I was, again, 86 World Cup is the first World Cup that I really remember. That's kind of the early days of falling in love with the beautiful game. And that goal he scored, well, both goals he scored against England were brilliant, right? But the one where he used his feet mainly was, for me, still the greatest goal.
Both of them were great. Don't question the one that used his hand. Like, they're both amazing. They're both legitimate goals. Just asking.
I thought it was a header. Header with the help of the hand god. So I absolutely, Maradona. He gets a lot of stick just on the basis of,
you love the nose beers, yeah.
Oh yeah, but also a lot of the kids go, he's the modern game, etc., etc. The guy was 5'5" and had a chronic drug and alcohol problem, and he was still the best player in the world. He had zero protection from refs compared to what you would get now. He got booted up and down. He never took a backward step. An absolute mad lunatic, but I think the greatest player to grace the game.
You want to talk about another bit of a lunatic? We signed John Hartson back in the day, and he had his little bit of things going on. There was a guy at the same sort of time that I was like, imagine if we signed Robbie Fowler. Talking about lunatics, there you go.
Yeah, Fowler was a decent player. Well, more than a decent player at the time. I actually saw him turn out for Perth Glory. I had the misfortune to see him turn out for Perth Glory. I think it might have been one of the last times, probably not the last time I went to any league match, but one of the last times. And it's sort of, unfortunately, things like that turned me off the A League. Like he literally he got the ball knocked off him inside the centre circle, and he did quite a wide turn because his arse was quite big by then, and sprayed a pretty nice pass, but it's just a pretty regulation nice pass out to the left wing, and he nearly got a standing ovation. I was like, is this the expectation level? So yeah, no,
it's what with Del Piero over here when he was just running along. Waddling along, and then he's like, I'm out of breath now, so I'll just stop in front of a defender, let him run into my ass, put me on the ground, and win a free kick, and then I'll get up and hit the free kick, have a shot. So it's kind of like the same sort of stuff you see in there. It's like you're saying with Fowler, and the crowd goes absolutely wild for it. I'm like, he didn't do anything. He initiated contact and fell over.
Absolutely.
I get what you mean.
What a funny one.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Well, thanks for jumping on for a Tim talk with us. It's been great to learn a bit about you and your Celtic journey, like as a supporter. So thanks for that, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy the episode and tune in and listen to your thoughts going into next season as well on the Celtic Down Under podcast. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jarrod. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.